Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Jennifer Jones Austin, and I am here to welcome you all into a very special and important Racial Justice Commission panel and input session. My pronouns are she, her, and what we're here to do this afternoon is in partnership with the Department of Youth and Community Development, hear from New Yorkers who are leading in the present and shaping our future, our youth. So again, I want to welcome you to the virtual Youth for Racial Justice panel and input session. I've been appointed to serve as chair of the Racial Justice panel, but I am just one of 11 commissioners, all with equal voices. And I'm here standing or sitting with you in the capacity as a commission member. There are other commission members who are here with us today for this input session, and I would like them to introduce themselves at this point. Are commissioners able to unmute themselves, beginning with Commissioner Bermudez?
Yes. Hello, everybody. I'm particularly excited to be here today as my entire career has been working with young people. So I am Ana Bermudez. My day job is as commissioner for the Department of Probation here in the city. I am a commission member, but not as the commissioner of probation, but more of a citizen. Committed to racial justice. My pronouns are she, hers, ella.
Thank you. Commissioner Davey?
Hi, I am Fred Davey. I am, in my day job, Senior Strategic Advisor to the President at Union Theological Seminary at Columbia University. I also serve as a chair of the New York City Civilian Complaint Review Board, but as with Commissioner Bermudez, I serve on this commission as a private citizen in New York, and also someone who's worked with young people in nearly every aspect of my career, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from the youth of the city today.
Thank you. Commissioner and Vice Chair Garrido.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Henry Garrido. I'm Executive Director of District Council 37. I should say he, him, his, él, and I am honored to be here with you, share some ideas. We represent public sector employees, the largest municipal union in the country, representing about 40% of all city workers. And I am honored, as I said, honored to be here. Very eager to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. We need to make sure that Commissioner Mata needs to be unmuted. Let's go to Commissioner Yu.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joanne Yu. I'm the Executive Director of the Asian American Federation. But in this capacity, I am here as a commissioner of the Racial Justice Commission, and I'm really excited to hear from the youth of our city and excited to take lots of notes. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Mata.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joanne Mata. In my day job, I am the Executive Director of La Colmena, an immigrant rights organization based here in Staten Island. My pronouns are she, her, ella, and I'm really excited to hear from all of you.
Thank you all, commissioners. There are several other commissioners who aren't able to be with us this afternoon and this evening, but we will ensure that the fruits of this conversation, what we talk about today, that they will be very much made aware of, and we'll have it on their minds as we deliberate as a commission. So before we jump into our discussion tonight, hearing from you all and engaging in a back and forth to learn from you, just want to acknowledge the history of the land in which we convened this afternoon, this evening. We're not in person, obviously, but we are tuning in, from places that sit on the land of Native people indigenous to this country and the traditional home of the Munsee, Lenape, Rockaway, Canarsie, and Wappinger peoples. I want to thank you all again for attending today's session, and really just want to encourage you to tell us what you believe are the most critical issues that we as appointed commission members should address as we make changes to the New York City Charter, which is essentially the New York City Constitution. We want to do the work that has the greatest impact on the lives of all persons, and especially youth impacted by racism here and across New York City. So we want to make sure that we hear and we learn from you. I want to tell you a little bit more about the Racial Justice Commission so that we all just have the same understanding. The commission is tasked with proposing changes to the New York City Charter, changes that are going to uproot structural racism. We're going to lay the groundwork for a racially equitable city, where race is not a determinant of economic, political, social, or psychological outcomes. New York City voters will be able to vote on our proposals, on the commission's proposals, as ballot measures in the November 2022 election, not this coming election season or cycle, but in 2022. As I said a moment ago, the charter is like the Constitution. It is the Constitution of New York City. It's the foundation of our government. The charter determines the roles and responsibilities of city agencies, the mayor, and other elected officials. The commission is empowered to propose changes to the charter, which then have to be approved by New York City voters. Through charter revision, the commission can propose direct changes that will affect you, your families, the schools, neighborhoods, communities, changes that relate to how government spends money and makes decisions. We can change government in all aspects of life, including health, education, housing, economic opportunities, and policing. We can create or change agencies. We can change the power of officials. Commissioner Yu, would you share more about the statement of purpose? Is Commissioner Yu with us?
Great. Yep. I just needed to be unmuted. So the statement of purpose, the commission values your expertise not only as an engaged resident of New York City, but as the future of New York City. Every voice matters, and the voice of youth matter most. As the changes that come out of these revisions will greatly dictate your future. You have firsthand experience on the ways in which city government impacts your day-to-day life, from the curriculum you learn in school to the housing security and affordability, zoning, parks, small businesses on your corridor, public safety, and so much more. To hear what critical issues most impact your ability to feel empowered, gain access to resources and services, and have opportunities to live a thriving, healthy, and safe life in your respective communities. We need the youth perspective to bring to the commission's attention to ways the government can act unfairly towards young people that we may not know about. Every testimony will be kept in city record, and the highlighted issues will shape what the commission creates as ballot measures. If you're joining us and will not be 18 by November 8th, 2020, know that your input tonight will shape ballot measures voted on in the November 2022 election.
Commissioner Davey?
Yes. Thank you. And again, it's really nice to be here. Great to be here today. And I'm going to do the session overview. So today we want to take the necessary steps to restore balance of power to the community so that we have incorporated restorative justice techniques into this session. We acknowledge that many in this Zoom have been fighting for racial justice while enduring the very inequities you are fighting against. We acknowledge the harm of racism and the harm it's caused to Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. We will then review group agreements to set the foundation for our session tonight, at which point youth panelists will share presentations, and after we will begin community testimony. If you haven't already signed up and are interested in testifying publicly today, please indicate that in the chat. Each person gets 3 minutes to testify. I guess I'm supposed to emphasize 3 minutes because it's written twice in these remarks. So each person gets 3 minutes to testify. There will be a stop clock on the screen to help guide you and to help you stay on time. We will notify you with a sound when you have 30 seconds left to speak. Please respect the time. Commissioners may have follow-up questions of those who are testifying. You will not be timed, but please keep your responses brief. We will call speakers in order in which they've registered. We will call speakers to testify one at a time. After you testify, you may have questions. We may have questions for you. So please keep your camera on and/or stay attentive after you speak. After the Q&A, the next speaker will be called. This may take a couple of minutes to get, but with the awesome support of our staff, we will be guided through this process. So please be patient with us. Also, please note, today we have mental health support in the form of staff who are here, who are trained to provide emotional support when necessary. If you're having difficulty or a difficult time emotionally with anything said in this meeting, please feel free to email racialjustice@charter.nyc.gov. Again, racialjustice@charter.nyc.gov. And we will connect you to our trained mental health responders. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Mata?
I will not be reading the statement of harm. So we are also here today to acknowledge what many of us already know, that racial inequities are baked into the very foundations of the city. Deep-seated structural inequities continue to be reflected in almost every aspect of life, including health, education, and public safety, and how our communities are resourced. Many of you in this room have borne the brunt of this reality for far too long. And through the Racial Justice Commission, we have an opportunity to start to address and rectify the harms of these past racial structures, and we hope to change the structure to the city and government and how it functions to adequately and equitable serve all New Yorkers, no matter what their race or zip code. I will now pass it on to Ana Bermudez.
Mute. Sorry, I did it again. So over the last several public sessions we've hosted, and in partnership with DYCD, we have worked to create some group agreements so that we can have fruitful conversations. And these are that we will show respect for ourselves for showing up and participating in doing the work of seeking racial justice. We have an open mind. We feel safe. We're going to feel safe to share our thoughts and to be able to do that, of course, not judge anyone. We're adopting ELMO, enough, let's move on, concept. We'll have respect for the virtual space that we occupy, respect for each other's right to speak, so one mic, and we will mute ourselves when we're not speaking. Respect for each other's time. We will respect the 3-minute time limit for individuals. Very importantly, we are going to live by love, honesty, and transparency. And if you have a question, drop it in the chat in all caps. So if we all agree to these points today, we will have a very successful and meaningful discussion. Jennifer?
Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to begin first with a panel, a group of panelists and a group presentation. The panelists are comprised of individuals representing 3 entities or 3 groups. We're welcoming youth from the Citizens Committee for Children to present Voicing Our Youth Priorities for a More Equitable New York. They will present for a total of 8 minutes. I'll give their names in just a minute. The second group is it's a youth and youth advisor from the Civic Engagement Commission. They too will have a total of 8 minutes to present their vision for racial justice. And thirdly, we're going to have youth from the DYCD programs to present on the NYC Youth Agenda. Again, they will have a total of 8 minutes. We'll begin first with the Citizens Committee, who is represented by Megan Barr, Aiden Hatsamamos, and Edward Sanchez. Then the second group will go right after, and they too will have a total of 8 minutes. And those persons representing the Civic Engagement Commission are Franesco Tena, who is advisor of the People's Fellowship, co-presenting with, and please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing names and correct me, Ifeoluwa Aluko, a People's Fellow with the Civic Engagement Committee. And then the third group, the DYCD group, is represented by the following people: Miriam Oguntola, forgive me, Mohammed Oguntola, Elijah Green, Amanda Reynolds, Edward Sanchez, and Ibube Nimwambi. Help me. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your names. And again, please correct me. First 8 minutes are for Citizens Committee for Children. Please unmute yourselves and begin presenting.
Good afternoon. We are New York City high school students and youth advocates with Citizens Committee for Children. CCC is a 76-year-old independent multi-issue child advocacy organization dedicated to ensuring that every New York child is healthy, housed, educated, and safe. We document the facts, engage and mobilize New Yorkers, and advocate for solutions. Youth Action members are high school students from across the 5 boroughs who join CCC to be trained and mobilized around policy change in our schools and communities. We would like to thank the New York City Racial Justice Commission and Department of Youth and Community Development for the opportunity to provide testimony related to structural racism in the New York City Charter. While we understand that many of the issues and recommendations in the document may not fall under the purview of the New York City Charter, we would like to take our youth-centered priorities to be at the forefront of decisions made by the Commission as they work to achieve equity in New York City structures, systems, and governing documents.
I just wanted to make sure, are we having any problems that Aiden and Edward know
In the
that?
chat, it says that they cannot unmute.
It wouldn't let me unmute, but now it's all fixed.
Okay, let's make sure that we have your time back. So, okay.
Thank you. Over the last year, Youth Action members have been immersed in Voicing Our Future, a multifaceted project to bring youth perspectives to the forefront of conversations around public policy. To this end, last winter, we surveyed over 1,300 youth from throughout the 5 boroughs, reaching youth from almost every zip code in the city. The survey consisted of a series of questions centered around the priorities of young people and their experiences in New York City schools and communities. We also conducted a series of focus groups with an additional 250 youth to gather input on designing the survey, unpacking the results, and creating recommendations for change. We will link to the full findings and we will link to the full findings of the survey in the chat. And we sincerely hope these findings can inform your work going forward. For today, we have identified educational and employment opportunities, mental health, and policing in schools as priorities we would like to focus on to create a more equitable future for New York City's young people. Each of these issues affects the daily lives of youth citywide, and racially unjust policies have created disproportionately negative outcomes in each of these areas for the city's Black, Latinx, and immigrant youth. In addition, almost a third of New Yorkers are under 24, which is why it is extremely important to have youth-centered priorities embedded in our laws and policies.
The first thing we'd like to talk about is educational and employment opportunities for youth. Last year, all students experienced profound isolation and learning loss as the pandemic prevented students from being in classrooms. According to data from the New York City Department of Education, only 85% of students had interactions with remote learning during the spring 2020 term, and rates of interaction were lowest in districts with high economic insecurity and among students in temporary housing. The issue disproportionately impacts Black and Latinx youth, further exacerbating racial inequities in education that predated the pandemic, which can be seen in historical disparities between white students and their Black and Latinx counterparts in test scores, graduation rates, and college readiness. More than half of the youth we surveyed reported that they did not receive extracurricular support such as tutoring, college, internship, or job opportunities in the last year. Citywide, the percentage of youth age 14 to 16 who are not in school or working, disconnected youth, has decreased close to 5% points since 2009. In 2019, Black and Latino youth, Latinx youth, reported rates of disconnection at roughly 2 times those of white youth. Youth who completed the Voicing Our Future survey indicated that the educational support ranks first on a list of important resources for youth in New York City, and extracurricular opportunities ranks 4th. In addition to the profound need for investments in schools and youth enrichment and employment opportunities, we must address the fact that New York City has the most segregated school system in the country, which continuously excludes Black and Latinx students from admittance into the city's highest performing schools. This is explicitly racist and needs to be remedied. And we know that desegregated schools are not just good for students of color, but for white students as well. In order to address racial disparities with respect to educational and employment opportunities for youth, New York City must take action to these 4 recommendations. 1, create universal youth development opportunities for year-round learning that are holistic and culturally responsive. 2, expand year-round youth employment opportunities, such as the Summer Youth Employment Program, also known as SYEP. 3, improve college and career readiness programs through the CUNY and SUNY systems and through partnerships with private colleges, and expand access to Black, Latinx, and immigrant students. And lastly, integrate New York City schools by reimagining admissions policies to ensure that Black, Latinx, and low-income students are not shut out of the city's most competitive and desirable schools.
Next, we'd like to talk about youth mental health. Prioritizing policies that promote healthy child development and behavioral health is extremely important, as mental health is such a prevalent issue that suicide is the 2nd leading cause of death for individuals from 15 to 19, and the 3rd leading cause of death for children 5 to 14. The rate of suicide is higher among youth living in poverty, LGBT+, Black and Latino youth, and girls. These statistics are devastating and are often directly caused by the absence of proper mental health services across the board, but especially for these vulnerable populations. In the mental health crisis we are facing, anxiety and depression increasingly impact more and more of our city's youth, with the stressors that have arisen in recent years, ranging from the rise of social media to climate change to the effects of the coronavirus pandemic. Our survey indicates that the 2nd most important resource for New York City youth, following educational support, is mental health support. In our data, we also found that 35% of our participants wanted or needed mental health services, and of this 35%, only 42% of these individuals were able to access these necessary and desired services, which would better their lives. In order to address racial disparities with respect to mental health for youth, New York City must take action to 1, substantially increase investments in a full continuum of behavioral supports for students in K-12 schools, including whole school approaches that are healing-centered and trauma-informed. 2, strengthen relationships with community-based behavioral health providers. 3, support team-based models that engage mental health professionals and school staff in student well-being. 4, ensure that students with higher level needs have access to clinical services. 5, engage communities to determine which array of services are most needed in each community and school. And finally, provide schools with a specific plan, resources, training, and funding to support the mental health needs of students and aid their social and emotional healing from the pandemic.
Finally, we will turn to policing in New York City schools. Police presence in schools have been a topic of contentious debate recently, and this topic is even more relevant with New York City having more school safety agents and NYPD than any other school district in the country. Many feel a need to move away from punitive measures and implement more restorative practices with a focus on community building to dismantle the policing culture in New York City public schools. In order to address this concern, we are advocating for schools to prioritize the importance of social emotional well-being with mental health support from social workers as opposed to criminalizing students. Interestingly, in the Voicing Our Future survey, only 30% of respondents report that having police officers in schools does not make them feel safer, while 45% say they do feel safer with police in schools. While unpacking this finding in focus groups with youth, we found that many youth have relationships with their school safety agents that is more reflective of a social worker than a police officer. But these police officers are not trained in this field, meaning that replacing officers with guidance counselors and social workers would benefit youth. Regardless of the fact that many students have positive relationships with their school safety officers, there are many students for whom policing in schools have detrimental effects, especially Black and Brown students. Black and Latinx students are disproportionately impacted by over-policing in schools, making up 91% of students who are arrested or receive summons in schools. While Black girls make up 22% of the public school population, they make up 66% of all girls targeted for police mitigation. Students who come into contact with the police in schools are twice as likely to drop out. New York City currently employs more school safety officers than guidance counselors and social workers combined, spending over $450 million on the school safety division each year. In order to address racial disparities with respect to policing in schools, New York City must take action to reduce the size and scope of presence in school safety agents and NYPD in schools with the ultimate goal of phasing out the school safety agents entirely. Redirect funds from school policing to implement healing-centered and restorative and trauma-responsive practices in place of punitive measures, and to end zero-tolerance policies that are subjectively administered and disproportionately target Black and Brown youth.
Thank you. Thank you all. We will have questions for you as once we finish hearing from the other groups. So we will now turn to the representatives of the Civic Engagement Commission, the Youth and Youth Advisor. Please begin. You have a total of 8 minutes.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. My name is Franesco Tena. My pronouns are he, him, his. Let me just get my screen share up and running. One sec. Okay. And today, me and my co-presenter, Ifalua, are going to talk about a democratic innovation that engages people better than anything else I've seen. And it's not just according to me, but it's a certified best practice endorsed by the Obama White House, the Movement for Black Lives, the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, and thousands of city leaders around the world. And it's called participatory budgeting. And so what that is, a really basic definition, is a democratic process in which community members can vote and decide how their tax dollars are spent. It's something that is not just a one-off, but in New York City, what it looks like is in city council, folks designing the process, having residents come in, having residents brainstorm ideas on how to spend a pot of money. There's $35 million at stake in the latest cycle of City Council PB. Having residents take those ideas and work with city staff to brainstorm how to flesh them out and turn them into full project proposals, and then having a vote where residents can vote and decide, and the projects that get the most votes get implemented. One of the things about PB is that it's not a simulation. It's not a consultation. These are real decisions that are going to be made about real money. It's an annual cycle. It's not something you do once, and it's part of the budget. It's not something we do to decide how the whole budget is spent. It was developed in the Global South in Brazil, and at one point, the city that developed it was was deciding how to spend about 33% of its budget using participatory budgeting. For us, in order to be inclusive and equity, in order to be successful in doing this right, there are 5 things that we talk about a lot. First, we start with money that matters. And so for the communities that you want to engage, for example, if you want to engage young people, you would use funding for schools or youth programs or other things that will excite young people. If you want to achieve racial justice, then use budgets from programs designed to serve those who bear the burden of racial inequities. The second thing we need is grassroots leaderships, making sure that your process is led by people from the communities you want to engage. We always start our processes by setting up a steering committee of local community orgs, especially groups that work with low-income people, people of color, and other folks that we're looking to engage. The third thing we want to do is design a process that's inclusive and accessible. That means holding meetings at convenient times and locations with food, with childcare, interpretation, and translation. One of the great things about what we do is we could bring it to where people already are. You can have voting at school during the school day. You could have it on the street, have it at a MTA station. These are all really great ways to get new folks to participate. This practice has grown over the last 20 years. It first started in North America, in Canada in 2001. We launched the first PB process in the US in Chicago in 2009. And since then it has spread pretty rapidly. This is a quick GIF of some of the places that we've seen. I wanna lift up one city in particular, which is Paris. They allocate $100 million every year for participatory budgeting, which is 5% of the Paris city budget. And it happens citywide, it happens in districts, and it happens in schools. Some things we see when we do participatory budgeting is broader political participation. We see folks who are ineligible to vote in regular elections come out and vote in this process. We see folks who are low income come out and vote in this process. We also see stronger relationships between government, organizations, and residents. So this process strengthens relationships, and it's a much more positive process than most government engages. It's about what do you want rather than protesting against government or reacting to a plan that's already been thought out without folks in community. The last thing that I want to talk about is it leads to more equitable and effective spending. PB improves public spending by directing resources to communities with the greatest needs. It makes spending more effective as people look for ways to get more done with the resources available. We see this creativity emerge and folks bringing other people into the process to identify creative ways to address community needs. Now I want to hand it off to my co-presenter, Ifalua, to talk about what it looks like when you put young people, not just at the center, but at the helm of a process like participatory budgeting.
Yes, great. Thank you so much, Francesco. So as Francesco said, I'm Ifeoluwa, and he mentioned like a broad way of how participatory budgeting works, but I want to go into a specific way of how it works. So in 2020, a PB process was created and facilitated by young people in partnership with the Civic Engagement Commission. And there were 5 distinct phases in this process. Our youth facilitators designed engagement activities that were used to find out what young people needed in the first phase. And then a statement of needs was published on what young people needed. And then our coalition builders, of which I was a part of, partnered with over 80 youth organizations to just get their young people to participate in this process. And then after that, during the second phase of the process, youth organizations were welcome to submit proposals to address the needs that young people had. And about 51 organizations submitted a proposal, and all of those proposals were approved to be on the ballot by the Civic Engagement Commission. And then after that, the third phase was when young people voted. And because this process was primarily youth-led, the minimum age requirement was lowered to 9, which is lower than the minimum age requirement to vote in the city council's PB process. And young people voted on our brand new website called Decidem, a platform that was designed by our youth platform moderator. And also 2,028 young people voted in this process. And then after that, after young people voted, the votes were counted, and we chose, or rather, young people chose 5 winners, and each of those winners won $20,000 to implement their projects. You can see the winners on this page. Some, the Green Space Project from Brooklyn, Recycling and Climate Change Project, and many more organizations won. And yes, my apologies. So as Franesco mentioned, the primary purpose for participatory budgeting is to put real money and therefore real power in the hands of people, especially those who are normally marginalized when it comes to making decisions. And as you can see by this graph, many minority groups were really represented in this process, which means that it was pretty successful. And not only that, but 84% of participants said that they would want to hear about other ways to get involved in civic engagement. And so when the winners were announced, we did this whole live stream. And and one of the questions that was asked was, what does this process mean for you? And I just want to like quote some things that some of my co-facilitators mentioned. Manahill, who was one of our virtual facilitators, she said that there was this camaraderie between different types of youths, no matter what background. And she also said it was a huge way to unite young people. And Darlene also said that the youths were a driving force in every single phase of this process. So I guess that brings us to like, why is this important? And I think or rather, I guess we can all agree that this is important because 1, it empowers young people. 2, it allows for diversity and inclusion. And 3, it allows for unity. For when a group of young people or a group of people work together towards one goal, unity is a non-negotiable. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. And now we'll move to the third group. And you may begin speaking now. The third group, representatives from DYCD, you may begin for a total of 8 minutes.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Ibube Weme. I represent the We the Youth Advisors Council and my brother sister Keepers Youth Council, MBSK. During the pandemic, we all witnessed, We the Youth Advisory Council will be presenting with the Youth Agenda today. During the pandemic, we all witnessed the murder of George Floyd. This incident amplified that racism is embedded in America's social construct, and it left our nation divided. Protests, hashtags, and public outrage due to the murders and brutality of people of color became a constant occurrence. The youths were frustrated. Despite all their hard work and public outcry, being in the front lines of the protest, the youth were still the most vulnerable population to be hit hardest by COVID-19. The restructuring of the NYC budget led to the cancellation of the Summer Youth Employment Program, SYP, and closing of community centers and after-school programs, which were vital resources to the youth of New York City. The objective of the Youth Agenda is to amplify the issues affecting youth in NYC, to pose youth-generated recommendations, and lastly, to focus on youth as a way to create a better NYC for methodology. Using systemic racism as a lens, we've identified the following priorities. In the interest of time, we will give you a snapshot of these priorities: learning, health and well-being, civic participation, economics, gender and LGBTQ justice, policing and community safety, community and housing, and the impact of COVID-19. At this point, I will allow my peers to review aspects of the Youth Agenda priority recommendations and why they should be considered for the ballot for the NYC Charter. Edward, please would you get us started on the first priority, civic participation?
Thanks, Ibube. As you said, we're going to get started on our first priority, which resonates with me, which is civic participation. According to the Youth Ask Youth census, while 2/3 of young people, which is 68%, express interest in opportunities to impact what goes on in their neighborhood, far less reported that they have opportunities for community participation. This is why we must integrate civic education into school curricula and programming. Organizations can also provide workshops to educate youth and community members about the rights and obligations of citizens in society. I think this is important to add in the New York City charters so that BIPOC youth can be further improved and provide more opportunities for them to take advantage of and help develop skills for them to be civically engaged in their community and the society that surrounds them. Now I'm going to turn it over to Miriam and Amanda to speak about two of the learning recommendations.
Thank you, Edward. Did you know that slightly more than half of the youth respondents, 54%, feel prepared to accomplish the next thing they want to in life in terms of personal, academic, or professional development? However, 15% of young people say they do not feel prepared. Our recommendation is to establish a more relatable and specialized curriculum that matches the career and life goals of young people. I think it is important to add an equitable education component to the NYC charter so that youth of color are given the same opportunities as the other counterparts and have access to similar resources that will allow us to succeed. Amanda, do you have anything to add?
Yes, thank you, Miriam. Because we live in one of the most diverse cities in the world, I believe that this calls for curriculums that reflect and support students of color. This is why this recommendation for the NYC Youth Agenda means a lot to me. So the recommendation is implementing a curriculum that is diverse, transparent, and critical. If we dismantle the school to prison pipeline, we also must acknowledge that inclusivity in curriculums is a must, not just a nice thing to have. If we want to see young Black and Brown people succeed, they must be able to see themselves in and relate to their own curriculum. I'm going to turn it over to Elijah to speak about two of the mental health recommendations.
Thank you so much for that, Amanda and Edward and Miriam. So I'm going to be speaking about mental health. So the Youth Ask Youth Census 2020 found that among youth who reported a need for mental health services, only 42% received them. As a young man of color, this doesn't surprise me. It used to be taboo to go and seek help. And now that young Black men are asking for support and help them navigate through trauma, they don't have access to it. So my recommendation would be to provide free and accessible and inclusive health and mental health resources for all. This must be included in the NYC City Charter. I believe that this is important because mental health is stigmatized between individuals, especially BIPOC youth and LGBT youth in New York City. With this information that is in resources that are being released, it could change the game on mental health and general health of all youth. Now I will pass it on to Mohammed, who will speak about goals of New York City Youth Agenda.
Collectively, we want to see the New York City Youth Agenda influence the next mayor, city council members, and government officials, and we want to see them prioritize the youth. And to do that, youth need a seat at the table when decisions are being made about their lives, including youth priorities in the New York City Charter is the best place to start. We need youth agenda recommendations to be adopted into policy, practices, and funding. This will demonstrate how important it is to cultivate true youth and adult partnerships for the success and future of New York City. I'll pass it over to Ebube to close us out.
Thank you very much to my fellow youth advisors. I think, as you can hear, this is a topic that's very passionate to us. Youth of different ages from the 5 boroughs of New York City have come together to create a platform where youth voice matters. We realize that we are all in the same struggle, and if we don't speak up, we'll continue to be in that struggle. We do not depend on empty promises to address our needs, so we created the Youth Agenda that highlights our needs and the issues that should be prioritized to make NYC a better place for youth of all colors, genders, and ethnicities. It is the city's responsibility to create and foster inclusive democratic opportunities for you to participate in creating the communities that will support that development. Our data shows us that youth have a hunger to contribute to shaping the services, programs, and policies that affect them. The city needs to truly listen to young people and recognize that their contributions are assets and a missing component in policymaking in New York City. We will have stronger programs when youth are involved in the planning because they're experts on what they need. This youth agenda presents many innovative solutions that youth have designed to point the way forward. The youth will continue to voice their truth and to hold our city leaders accountable for meeting our needs. If you would like to know more about youth, if you'd like to know more about our youth recommendations and endorse the youth agenda, please visit nyc.gov/NYC Youth Agenda. And I will also put that link in the chat for everyone that needs that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all. I want to begin the next portion of our time together this evening by first thanking all of the panelists for your presentations. The substance and the relevance of your presentations and your recommendations, as well as the clarity with which you speak, is so compelling and just gives us all so much food for thought and gives us, places and spaces in which to look and to move. And so I want to thank you and express my heartfelt appreciation for the substance and the clarity with which you speak. We're now going to hear from our commissioners who may have questions or comments for any one of you or for all of you. There are several of us on the Zoom, so it may be a little difficult to manage. And what I'm going to ask that we all do, both commission members and the panelists, I'm going to ask the commissioners to raise their hands to ask questions, and then I'm going to ask the panelists to also raise your hands, and so that we can kind of manage the back and forth. Good deal? All right, the first hand that I saw go up, I don't know if it was the first hand to go up or the first hand I saw, is that of Commissioner Bermudez.
Okay, so I could be here for days with you guys, but I will raise 3 issues that I want to see if you guys can comment some more on. And thank you for your presentations, they were fantastic. As to the participatory budgeting, would your recommendation be that if we can figure it out, I really don't know myself enough about the charter at this point on this issue, that we find some way of almost dictating what, like, a percentage of the city budget be allotted via participatory budgeting. So that's one way, one question. My second question is about school safety, right? There's, as you know, a big push for having, for switching the school safety from police to schools. Some folks, including you and including me, don't believe that that's the solution either, because school safety in and of itself may be, that whole idea. And you cited a very stark statistic of how many, more there are than emotional health support and resources in schools. So if you could comment on, so the public is concerned, let's put it that way, about crime in the schools and so on and so forth, right? So how do you balance those concerns of the public and the need for students to feel safe and be safe without a policing structure, whether it's under DOE or otherwise? I mean, it's a policing structure. So if folks could comment on that. And last but not least, one concern I have about having even more mental health professionals, there's an interesting distinction to me, an important distinction between mental health or emotional health resources, right, and having mental health professionals or social workers, because nobody comes out of a mental health professional's office without a diagnosis. And I know, and I've experienced so many of our Black and brown young people being diagnosed with something that then they get medicated for, and then they get labeled in special ed for, and so on and so forth, that it's almost like the school to prison pipeline, but it's school to dropout pipeline in a way, because the young people don't feel successful in school. Anyway, I'm sorry. I know these are very broad topics. But if anybody wants to comment on any of these. So participatory budgeting, school safety, school, and then mental health.
And if I just may remind, like one of the very first questions that I heard was, are you recommending a specific percentage?
Right.
And if I may just add to that, and who participates in that process?
Right.
Is it just the people who get to vote, or is it others? I see that two
sorry about that. This is Franesco. I can answer those questions.
Please jump in, Franesco, and then I'll see if there's a second.
Yeah, unmuted, then I'm muted, then I couldn't unmute. It was a mess. Thank you so much for those questions. I really appreciate the interest on the topic. A few things. There is currently a citywide or a charter mandate to do citywide participatory budgeting. It was a referendum in 2018. That still has not happened. The city has not followed through on that citywide mandate. So that's one piece of context that I want to offer. It's under the Civic Engagement Commission's mandate to do that. The second thing is I do think that there should be a percentage allocated in the chart and named in the charter. I think there's precedent for up to 5%. I think the bare minimum we want is between 2 and 3%. But I think there is precedent for that to happen based on what's happened in other cities and just the scale of what money matters in this moment. And the third thing that I want to touch upon is the resources needed to actually run the process. And so making sure that we do have a fully resourced Civic Engagement Commission that could run these processes, not just from a citywide capacity, but when city departments have an issue that they want to tackle and have a budget, they should be able to turn to the Civic Engagement Commission to help them provide technical assistance to lead a meaningful civic engagement process. I think there is precedent for what we see in other cities of about $10 per capita. And so what is the population of New York? And what would it look like to spend $10 per person to help engage that, which would, I think, bring us around 80 million to run a process of several billion with a PB pot. And the last question I heard is who's involved in the process, which is a beautiful question. People who vote is not the only way to get involved in the process. And by the way, the folks who vote in PB, it's a larger set of folks than are eligible to vote in local local and national elections. As you heard earlier, we often drop the voting age from 18 to something lower. Folks who are not citizens, people who are just residents, are still invited to come in and vote. Folks who are formerly incarcerated are still invited to come in and vote. So even voting is more encompassing than traditional local and national elections. And that's not the only step that we ask people to participate in. As we're designing the process, as we're even thinking about what the topics are, it's a chance for us to really bring folks to the table who have been previously denied access to political decision-making. And that's how we design our process, not for those folks, but with those folks.
Thank you. Anna, any follow-up?
No, this is thank you. They're very succinct and clear answers. So,
thank you. Commissioner Garrido.
First of all, thank you all for your very concise, very informative information. I have two questions, one related to safety in the schools and the other related to higher education and the reference to CUNY and higher education in terms of how we connect student debt and other pieces to it. As it applies to school safety in the school and the idea that you are going to, or at least the proposed ideas that use police as a way of enforcing it. Why do you think is a big disconnect between the relationship you mentioned between students having much more of a social relationship with school safety than it is with police? And do you believe that the racial makeup of those who are policing the schools, a lot of Black and brown, have anything to do with that relationship? Or is it more of, like, I don't want to put too much words, more of a culture of PD rather than the culture of school safety? So that's my first question. And the second question has to do with the relationship of connecting, young adults who are coming out of high school into a higher education process in the pipeline, so many of them who incurred into student debt, and finding now in CUNY that have very limited access to go into the very specialized programs, who create program pathways to go into particularly important city and state funded universities. And I wonder if you could give us some ideas where you think that we can work to facilitate that process, to help getting more students into programs and to do more for them and trying to connect the dots between people coming out of high school and into those programs that they may be interested in. Thank you, Madam Chair. Those are my two questions.
Are there any who would like to respond to that? I don't see any hands raised. I do see Edward Sanchez has raised your
Yes.
hand. Okay, please
Yes,
begin.
Thank you. I wanted to answer a question from before. I'll answer that question, but let me go back a bit before with concerning about community safety. With the idea of school safety officers in school, right? With the old question of, is it worth having school safety officers in school? I want to clarify what the question was about community safety, right? And concerning about in our communities, how do we make it more safer, right? And how to allow, students prosper more. And so, in terms of having officers in schools, right? Whereas you have in low income communities and more of those type of communities, you have more officers in school rather than in white neighborhoods where in those schools, there's barely any school safety officers. Why is that? Right. And, to also connect to the other question about to have a diverse, school staff, right? Black and brown teachers, schools of Social Security workers, right? Because the majority of teachers are of white. And you see that a lot of students, they connect more with school safety officers because they're more Black or brown compared to teachers that are more white. And so it's the idea that if we have this talk about desegregating schools and to integrate schools, why not about the workforce? What about the teachers? What about the school safety? Well, I guess the school safety officer, but the guidance counselors, the social workers, right? The people that students are, with every day, rather than a show of authority compared to school safety officers. Why not change that up, right? And so, so many kids in this country, they grow up without police in schools, and that there's no proof or data showing that police actually make schools safer, right? And so that's what I want to mention about community safety, and, that it could be better and that it doesn't have to be this way as it is now.
Thank you. Thank you. Ife Oluwa, did you want to say something? I saw your hand raised.
Yes, my apologies. I actually wanted Mr. Garrido to repeat his question on participatory budgeting.
Okay. Commissioner Garrido?
I didn't have a question about participatory budgeting. I had a question about the school safety, particularly as it applies to the makeup. And the second question was about facilitating the pathway of youth coming out of high school into higher education, CUNY, other programs that may be helpful to you and to others like you, and what we could do better to allow for access to those programs with people in order to help the young people coming out. Those are my two questions.
I see that Miriam has raised her hand to respond. Please begin.
To clarify better, you were asking that what programs can help you coming out of high school transfer better to like colleges like CUNY schools?
So I have two children of my own, right? So 22 and 24th, and I try to navigate to them in having the knowledge that I have of having going and accessing CUNY and programs and state, and we did the whole college tour. And I found the process, even for me, somebody who's knowledgeable, extremely difficult, cumbersome. The process of student debt was horrifying, right? Now, thank God the children had me in a way. We did this together, but I can't imagine somebody, especially with many parents who are immigrants who may not know the process of navigating the difficult process. And so what I have found, in my opinion, is that a lot of the students end up in student debt or end up in programs that they don't want to be in it, but that's what's available, right? And they want to go to college, they want to move themselves. So my question goes to a question of process, facilitating a pathway from coming out of the high school system and into a higher education process.
My opinion on that would be having a program that would immediately connect high school seniors into college. For example, I'm a 6th student, and so I'm a 6th student at John Jay College, so I'm a CUNY student, and that was a process I had to find myself. I did not know anything about SIC, so I did that through research. So I think it's also like educating like college counselors, like bringing in more college counselors, educating them about programs like SIC, HEOP, EOP, and these programs of high school seniors, especially when it comes to like immigrants and low-income students, helps them transfer into college with no one. So as a college junior, I have no student debts. I'm not going to be paying any student debt for my undergraduate study, and because of the SIC program, and there are many other programs out there too. So I think there needs to be more awareness brought into high schools, because a lot of people don't know about this program. So my suggestion would be hiring training college counselors on on these programs, so in order to like educate the students about these programs, and then creating more pathways, creating more connections with like schools like CUNYs. And they're already connection with CUNYs like through college now. So we see college now where we get to like experience college classes. I was also a participant of college now when I was in high school. So creating more opportunities like college now, and creating more connections with CUNYs and SUNYs, even SUNYs and private colleges, creating more programs through them that will allow students right in high school to also have like a little bit of college experience, and then hopefully connect them to the higher education they're looking for.
Thank you.
I'm a graduate myself, you should know. The graduate from City College School of Architecture and Environmental Studies. So the program.
I see that Amanda has raised her hand as well. Amanda?
Yeah, hi. I was overhearing what you guys were saying, and I'm a senior in high school right now, so I'm currently going through the college process. And my school, even though I go to a specialized high school, and though it's like a big school that's supposed to have a lot of funding, we currently don't have any college prep counselors. And our one guidance counselor that is for our grade is not fully educated on the whole college process, nor does she have the resources to connect with every single student from our entire grade to educate us about it. So like for me, when I hear that, I'm literally asking what would help me in this college process, like learn more about the CUNY system and learn more about advancing in my education. I think that information should be given to us from the school from day one. The process of transitioning into a higher education should be a part of our curriculum. It should, the amount of time that our school teaches us about our dress code, it should be put in to helping us receive a higher education, especially when half of my school is BIPOC and from low income backgrounds. So I think that it should, especially if you're going to public school, should always just be part of the curriculum any way that you can make it.
Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Davey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question and then a suggestion. So my question would be to the students. In the research that you've done, and thank you, by the way, each of you for your presentations and how well prepared you were, and the amount of research that you've done. But in your research, did you, and this goes to school safety, did you come across any models of school safety across the country that you felt might be appropriate for New York City public schools, of course, recognizing that we have the largest school system in the country here by far, actually, and our own unique issues in New York City. But is there anything out there that you've seen that could potentially be a model for what school safety should look like? And then my suggestion, Madam Chair, would be that since we've heard now a couple of times that the Civic Engagement Commission has the authority under the charter as it exists to create a more participatory process around any number of issues, but particularly budgeting. Maybe we should ask, if we haven't already, maybe we should ask to hear from them how we might affect certain structural changes in the charter to help them do their jobs a little or more effectively. But before we get there, it'd be great to hear from the students if they choose, if we've heard anything about alternatives for school safety that they might recommend.
Commissioner, thank you. And as I look to see if there are any hands raised, I thank you for the suggestion that you made, and I will talk with the commission team and follow through. Thank you. I don't see hands raised, but I would ask that our panelists, give that question some thought. And as you do, we'll move to hear from the other commissioners. Actually, I do see that Franesco Tena has raised his hand. So please respond.
Sorry, I didn't raise my hand because I'm not a student. But if in the absence, I'm happy to raise up one example from the Phoenix Union High School District. Last year, canceled its contract with the police department. And so we'll no longer have school resource officers in schools, and instead is using that money to run a participatory budgeting process where they reimagine school safety as a community. And so I just wanted to lift that up. I could maybe post a link in chat if folks want to read more about that.
Thank you, Franesco. And I should have said speakers instead of students, so my apologies.
Okay, very good. We've got just a few more minutes of Q&A before we have to move to hear from members of the community, but I do see that there are two panelists who've raised their hands, and so we also have two commission members who've raised their hands. So I'm just going to take a little facilitator liberty, and I'm going to say we're going to just stretch this a little bit more by a total of, say, 3 to 4 minutes. Megan and Aiden, if you would briefly respond to the commissioner's questions, that we may then also hear from Commissioner Yu and from Commissioner Mata. So Megan, Aiden?
Yeah, I can speak to your question about police-free school, like alternative like safety measures. So we spoke to members of police-free schools and also like healing-centered initiatives, and they have like really comprehensive toolkits and like reports that are like city-focused surrounding that topic. So yeah.
Thank you. And Aiden?
Me and Megan are actually from the same group, and I was going to say a similar thing, that we had talked to those people, and I actually think Laura has just dropped those links in the chat for those toolkits.
Okay, so we'll make sure we draw down those links. Thank you for that, and we will move to hear from Commissioner Yu, followed by Commissioner Mata. And so if you have questions, we'll just take them both, and then we'll go to the panelists.
My question is for the presenters who talked about communities of color curriculum. Besides the in-class learning, I think so much of the learning happens outside in different informal settings for youth of color to get to know Many of you don't even know the history of, may not know the entire history of your own community, let alone somebody else's community, right? And so in those informal settings, what's the best way you'd like to advise us to help think about how we spend our city dollars, creating those spaces for you to, not so much in the classroom, but outside of the classroom, where you get to openly talk about our community history, the curriculum, but also all that you are seeing, all that you are experiencing. For my community, it's been the anti-Asian hate for a year and a half. And so, what do you want us to think about? I mean, all of this trauma, the bullying, all of that stems from the fact that, we don't talk about our shared histories enough. And so, what would you like for us to think about to be able to help create spaces to spend city funding to ensure that you do have those opportunities, not only in the classroom, but in informal settings, to be able to, for you to have meaningful conversations with your fellow students?
I see that we have Edward Sanchez and Ibube Nimwale who raised their hands, but I'd like Commissioner Mata to raise her hand very quickly because we're short on time, and I want to make sure that we get questions asked and responded to. So Commissioner Mata, if you would just come in and just share your thoughts, reflections, and questions, and then we'll shift to the panelists and we'll close out.
Perfect. So, hi everyone. I'm Commissioner Mata, and like I said before, my day job, I'm the executive director of La Colmena, an immigrant rights organization, and a lot of my work has been around pushing for a pathway to citizenship and working closely with people who are undocumented, DACA recipients, TPS, one of the things that I was hearing when it was brought up with the participatory budget, what really caught my attention was how inclusive it is, right? How someone who is undocumented or DACA recipient has the opportunity to take on decisions that affect their communities. And with that, the reason that it caught my eye was because as we see in the electoral process, right, the voting system that we have in place, someone who is a DACA recipient or undocumented is not allowed to vote, right? Even though that is a whole other topic. However, many have contributed so much, right? Many have, we have seen during the pandemic how people who are undocumented, DACA recipients, whatnot, right? They were very essential during the pandemic. So my question, right, to those that presented the participatory budget, I want to hear from you. I want to hear what was the feedback from those youth that are undocumented DACA recipients that took part of this? How did they feel, right? How did they feel? And also, I know their contribution was highly qualified, that they contributed so much as well to the participatory budget, right? I want to hear how that was beneficial. And the reason I want to hear that is because it opens that gateway to say, see, this is why your voice is important. Through this process, I also want to let those that may be on this call, right, that are undocumented, that are DACA, that you are very important, that your voice matters. And this is why I want to hear from those that presented the participatory budget. That one, what was the feedback from people that are undocumented DACA recipients, right? And how beneficial was it, right, to hear from them through the participatory budget?
Thank you both. Now I see 5 hands raised, and so we're going to have to do a little bit of speed response. We want to hear from you, but we've got to close out so we can hear from other people. So I need you to limit it to like 30 seconds. Amanda?
Yes. So answering the first question about the programs and the spaces where we can learn more about our history, I think that there should maybe be like grants, because these programs that we're speaking of in these spaces already exist. It's just that some of these programs don't have the money to outreach to the kids that need it. And I would also focus on programs for youth. That means younger than high school, because being in touch with that history from a young age is really important, and that will engage the interest to want to further advocate for that history, and also learn more about it when they're older.
Thank you. Edward.
Thank you. I want to quickly add on to what Amanda said, right? With the increased funding for after school programs, but as well as CBO, community-based organizations, right? And helping them create, quality programs that reflect the cultures of that community, that further makes people more interested to engage in their own community, right? As well as in turn creating a safe space for them to go and show up and engage with other, with their own constituents, with their own community members.
Thank you. Ibube?
Thank you. Yeah, just following up with what Edward and Amanda said, I believe that if you increase the pay of after school programs to deliver quality, to deliver quality resources and activities with young children that reflect our culture, you will get more people that want to engage in that want to tap into that aspect. And even individuals that are aware of these cultures and know more about it and actually went to colleges and programs to study about these cultures, they'll want to talk about it and share their expertise when they know that they're being valued in the society. So I just think promoting that in schools and after school programs is going to make it easier for more people to want to engage and actually teach the cultures.
Thank you. And let's see, Miriam.
To add on to what they said, I also think taking school trips to like historical places that reflect the history of our community and beyond the history of the United States itself is very important. And the anniversary of 9/11 coming on, I was listening to the news where youths born after 9/11 went to like 9/11 memorial museums, and they were reflecting on what they thought about it. And I think that should happen when it comes to like youth in high school, middle school, elementary school. There should be trips, there should be organized trips to like places like this, so places that reflect the history of our community, the places that reflect the history of the United States, and for them to be able to experience it and also learn. It gives a way to hands-on experience learning too.
Very helpful. Ifeoluwa?
Yeah, I would like to pivot and respond to Commissioner Mata's question. So while we did not collect data on our participants' citizenship status, because some are often reluctant to reveal that information, we did collect data on the race of those who participated, and I can say that many minority groups were represented. And while I cannot speak on behalf of those who participated, I can say that from the facilitators and the youth leaders, as I also mentioned in the presentation, we felt pretty empowered because I think the It's Our Money participatory budgeting process, it's the It's Our Money process, I think it's one of its kind because you never really see processes like these that are entirely youth-led.
Excellent. Franesco, I'm going to let you have 20 seconds and we've got to move on.
Thank you. 20 seconds. The same caveat Ifeoluwa provided. We do collect some data, but it's anonymized, so we don't have that info. I have talked to young people who are in a detention center who otherwise wouldn't be able to participate in the process, and the words I hear from them are powerful. And so as y'all think about what to include in this charter, I would like to challenge y'all to live up to what I think civic engagement isn't just like loving your city, but seeing your city love you back. And if we're trying to instill trust in government, what would it look like for government to trust its people too?
Thank you. Thank you very much. On behalf of the Racial Justice Commission, we just want you to know, I want you to know that we greatly appreciate all that you've shared. and we will be delving into the recommendations that you've presented and may find ourselves coming back to you for additional information as we dig more deeply. Thank you all so very much. We're now going to turn to the community testimony where people will be presenting one at a time. And the way that this will work is that if you signed up to provide oral testimony, we're going to call your name. When you're called to testify, we'll unmute your line. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. When you speak, keep in mind that although it's only 3 minutes, we still need you to speak slowly because we have interpreters who want to make sure that they capture all that you've said for those who are not able to understand what you're saying verbally. This is being live streamed. Remember that. If you prefer not to be visual on live stream or be heard on live stream, then submit your testimony, written testimony, by visiting our website at nyc.gov/racial justice, nyc.gov/racial justice. And you can also click on the, when you get there, you click on the public engagement tab and the click submit your input. So now I will read the names of 4 speakers. You'll be lined up, and we're calling all 4 names at once so you know when you're coming. And as I call them, the order in which I call them is the order in which you will be called. After each speaker, we will go to the next person. And then when we're done with the 4, then we will hear from commissioners. We may have to, in the interest of time, limit some of the commissioner questions, but we would ask that the commissioners, if we have to do that, put them in the chat, and that gives the respondents an opportunity to at least see what it is you are interested in learning more about, and they can respond to it in that way. So we're going to get to the panelists. If you would just give me a minute. Okay, the first 4 persons from whom we will hear are Ashley Nguyenli, Tony Singfield, Selena Kissoon, and Kaylee Sherry. So the first is Ashley Nguyenli, Tony Singfield, Selena Kissoon, and Kaylee Sherry. Ashley, please begin.
My name is Ashley Nolan. I use they, them pronouns, and I am an alumni from the Young Women's Advisory Council at Girls for Gender Equity. When asked about the racial inequality in New York, the NYPD being rooted in racist and bigoted ideologies was the first thing that came to my mind. The state of the NYPD makes its way into the school system under the false notion of safety. This is why we need to divest in policing in schools and invest in practices that have been proven to be effective. Because even in the pandemic and after a hurricane, Black and brown young people are targets for race-related violence coming from the police. It is important to have police-free schools because students do not need to feel unsafe in a space that preaches safety. School is a place that is supposed to be open to testing the waters and learning to be more responsible and respectful individuals. For decades, you all put police officers in schools and you know this doesn't work, and yet you continue to fund them. Why? Let it be anything else, and if it doesn't work the first time, you cut it without hesitation. When you put police in schools, you are not allowing them the chance to make the mistake and learn from it. You are automatically holding them accountable for something they didn't even think to do. Police-free schools does not mean simply retraining police officers to be mindful of their impact on students. This means to completely remove them from the space and replace them with people who are better equipped to handle students who are having a hard time. Having police in schools does more harm than good because they set the tone that something criminal has already happened. Would you want your children feeling like criminals in a space that is meant to teach them how to navigate the world, not claim to rehabilitate them into? As an alternative to this, we should work to put forth more restorative practices that will allow this space to allow students to think through their mistakes. You are automatically holding students accountable for something they didn't think to do. The first step to liberation is feeling understood and valid in what you are experiencing. With police in our schools, there is automatically an understanding of misunderstanding and no chance for change or growth to happen. If there are no social workers that look like you or represent your experiences, how can healing happen? How are students supposed to learn how to be better if they constantly have to explain and emotionally support the person and what is they're going through every time they want to start unpacking their trauma? Young people are not inherently bad. There is no such thing as a bad child or bad teen. There are only young people who are trying to learn and navigate their ever-changing life by pushing the boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony Singfield.
Good evening, y'all. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Tony Singfield, and I represent Girls for Gender Equity's Youth Speakers Bureau. One way that racial inequity shows up in my life is the presentation of Black excellence as an equal opportunity. Those who succeed in sports or music or academics and more are then displayed as evidence that racism no longer exists in the systems we engage in, that all people have equal support and resources. That is simply untrue. To address this constant false belief, we must create and maintain safe environments for all Black youth, fill those with the support and resources we need, and ensure that our mental health is prioritized over outward showings of success. My speech was written, my chords were swinging, my face was beat, fresh full of makeup. Proudly, I strolled across the graduation stage, adjusted my mic, and began with the, "Can I get an ear?" You see, I had just earned the title of salutatorian, all while receiving a full ride to my dream college. That "ow" meant finally my feet found themselves grounded with achievement and acknowledgement. Success was at the tip of my tongue, or at least I thought. The definition of success, taught to many of my peers and I, required a good career, the white picket fence, and a nuclear family. It was a cute goal. However, how can I focus on a career or a house or a family years in the future when today I'm worried about the welfare of myself and my baby sister? When your father is a victim of mass incarceration and now suffers from associated PTSD, your present life requires some attention. I remember when my father was just released from prison. My sisters cried at his welcome home party. They embraced this man with so much love. There I sat confused, wondering how am I supposed to feel during this? The powerlessness of being unaware of one's emotions is paralyzing. Both my people and I need help, and we are simply not getting it. There's too many reasons why a high school student should be more concerned about their mental health than anything else. According to the 2019 Black and African American LGBTQ Youth Report by the Human Rights Campaign, 80% of Black LGBTQ youth feel depressed or down, while 90% have had trouble getting to sleep. That report also found that Black girls and young women of color who live in poverty receive mental health treatment at less than 1/3 the rate of young white women living in poverty. Black girls deserve access to culturally affirming mental health support, and they deserve to live self-determined lives. That includes access to mental health and physical health care. Black youth need access to counselors and therapists in schools. I think of the summer revolution of 2020, led by cries of Black Lives Matter. Here was a history-making event. The world witnessed Black people and their allies standing together against racism and police-driven genocide. It was remarkable. Black people demanded their government recognize that our Black skin does not nullify our lives. Success is not a career or a big home. Success is the achievement of liberation and safety for all. I'm calling on you to invest in holistic and culturally competent mental health care models. That includes community-level crisis intervention. Black people still need more than a fantasy, more than the quote, American dream can offer us. Black people need to more than matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The next person to speak will be Kaylee Sherry.
Good afternoon. My name is Kaylee Sherry. I use she, her pronouns, and I currently am a rising senior. The way racial inequity shows up in my community is the lack to recognize the social, mental, and physical impact of COVID-19 on Black and Brown communities. Communities hardest hit by COVID-19 were and continue to be Black and Brown neighborhoods across the city due to the lack of education surrounding the vaccine, where to get the vaccine, and COVID-19 as a whole. There's not a space that actively acknowledges the hardships that came with COVID-19, finds ways to work and unify community organizations doing their part in this work already, and brings radical self-care and resources to these various communities and families. In response to these concerns, New York City Civic Engagement Commission piloted a program onboarding youth and paying them for the work that they're doing, and piloting a program to create a festival in these communities most affected by COVID-19 and bringing mutual aid, food, music, and just general joy and radical self-care to these neighborhoods. They did this all accomplishing it with a bus that was on Rikers Island for 12 years and transforming it into a community space. And this bus toured all the 5 boroughs, again, going in neighborhoods most affected by COVID-19. And this happened throughout the entire summer, not just with the bus, but also with a mobile vehicle called the Ice Cream Truck of Rights, where we educated folks about their rights and gave away free ice cream. And I think all these different things encompassed the idea of radical self-care and realizing that a lot of people lost their families throughout COVID, had a hard time with educational inequities and other various adversities throughout COVID-19. And I think going forward, we currently only do have 1 mobile unit that toured all the 5 boroughs, but I would like to propose having a mobile unit in every borough so that these various mobile units could go around to these communities, not just bringing resources, mutual aid, and various resources regarding COVID-19, but also love, care, live music, and radical self-love. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We're not going to hear from Selena Kassoon. She had to leave us, but Mia Payne, we're going to substitute her in. So Mia, please unmute yourself and begin.
Hi, my name is Mia Payne. I'm a 17-year-old African-American female from the Bronx, New York, and the organization that I'm a part of is Why Vote. During my time in this program, I've explored my interest in the criminal justice system and climate justice issues such as environmental racism. And based on the knowledge that I have gained and experiences from my community, many evidence solutions have come to surface that I would like to raise today. Essentially, New York City needs to acknowledge the interconnectivity between housing, education, the environment, and the criminal justice system. A relationship that goes beyond my timing to go in depth about, but can easily be addressed by abolishing redlining policies, reallocating more of New York City fundings towards education, in particular civic education, and building trust between the police and communities of color by amplifying the presence of community boards in policy development, along with forcing a stronger presence of local officials in the communities they serve. These changes alone will lead to a more equitable housing system, empower voters, and provides impactful resources for communities to thrive beyond politics. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mia. Thank you to all 4 of you. I would now like to open the conversation up to commission members and would ask that commission members raise their hands. I'm going to jump in and ask the first question to all 4 of you, perhaps beginning with Tony. Tony, you talked about mental health, and then others of you talked about critical, resources and supports, and the importance of investment in critical resources and supports. Tony, through the years, what New York City has done is sometimes provided, added more counselors, social work counselors to schools, who sometimes aren't as, maybe as, how do I best say this? They're not necessarily mental health counselors. What would be your thoughts about how to create greater mental health supports for young persons in schools and in communities? Do you have any? And if you don't, I appreciate that, but I was just curious.
So your question is, how do we get more mental health
Right.
counselors in our schools?
What would be your thinking when you talk about the disparities that persist? I mean, I'd like to hear your thoughts about more of what is needed. Is it more social workers in schools? Is it people who are trained mental health therapists? What are your thoughts?
It's most definitely more guidance counselors. I most definitely understand that perhaps over the years, the government, New York City government, has put more counselors in the city, but as a bunch of commissioners have already said, New York City has one of the largest education systems across the country, meaning that Black people, once again, will disproportionately get the resources given to or from the government. And me saying that, I think that more counselors are needed, and the focus should be on schools that are in low socioeconomic, low socioeconomic neighborhoods, if that makes sense. The focus should be on Black people, because what we're talking about right now is equity. I feel like it's important to define that. Equity is not equality. Equity is the focus of a minority or a people who need more love than what everybody else is getting. And that's Black people. That's Black people first and foremost. Black BIPOC people, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. We need more counselors, and that should be the focus. We should be looked at and given those counselors, not just the general city. That's my thoughts on that. I don't know if that answers your question, or if you have another one.
It does, and I very much appreciate it. Are there others who want to talk about any like mental health supports? Are we good there? Kaylee? Kaylee, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, sorry. In regards to mental health resources, I would say having programs for folks within those communities to be trained on how to deal with folks who have mental health issues, but also on top of that, having folks within those communities talk to students with mental health issues, be from those communities. Because I've often seen instances where there are folks coming from various other communities coming into these communities, trying to best help Black and Brown students, but not acknowledging the various socio-emotional traumas that can come with being a Black or Brown student within a system that's not built for them.
Thank you very, very much. Appreciate your thoughts and comments. I don't see any of the commissioners. I just want to ensure that I'm not missing commissioners with questions.
Jennifer, can I just, I just would like to make a comment and something Ashley said, and that I appreciate greatly. And that is my everlasting concern that when children go into schools, the first person they see should not be someone in a uniform that, presupposes a criminal act, and so I greatly appreciate that. And I was wondering if, other than restorative justice practices that you mentioned, are there other practices that should be promoted in the schools to create that sense of belonging, care, love, what Tony just talked about, and acceptance of young people in their schools?
Madam Chair, if I might, I'd also just like to, I want to acknowledge these speakers, and I want to also just acknowledge, and I think it's to at least a portion of Commissioner Bermudez's comments, as well as Tony's and other comments, the prominence of the cry for mental health care and culturally competent, racially and ethnically competent community health, mental health care. And again, we are a charter revision commission in many respects, but I think we all this compels us to put on our creative hats to see how we can effectively respond to what has been a consistent cry now since almost we've begun these hearings. And I want to thank these young people for their courage, their bravery, their smarts, for setting these things before us. But particularly, I want them to know that we hear this deeply felt request for effective mental health interventions in the lives of the people in the city of New York.
Commissioner, both of you, I want to thank you for affirming what we've heard, and I echo your sentiments. Very, very much appreciated. Are there other commissioners or with comments or questions? Seeing that there aren't, I want to thank the four of you for your testimony, and yeah, just very much appreciate all that has been said. We'll now move to the next. I think I'm seeing something that tells me Ashley would like to respond. Ashley, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, there was a question asked about what more could be done besides removing school safety officers from schools. As was previously mentioned, I was thinking about not just restorative justice, but also like a lot of reform in the curriculum, because one of the biggest issues besides students being presumed to be criminal is the fact that we don't see ourselves when we're learning about anything. Like, I remember being in a statistics class and not knowing anything about like police brutality and what it's like to be me, a Black woman. And that bled into the way that teachers saw me and the way that teachers saw other students. So I think the biggest effort here would be to humanize this dehumanizing experience.
Ashley, that's an excellent point. I think so very often when we talk about curriculum and instruction and inclusive curriculum and instruction, there's a tendency to focus on, if you will, the contributions of African Americans and other persons of color to the building of America, which is vitally important, but not the experience, the demeaning, the demoralizing factors, the oppression of Blacks in America and other persons of color and Indigenous persons. So I thank you for bringing that out as a critical component of whatever is taught in the schools. Thank you so much. Let's move to the next set of persons to testify. And again, I want to thank those who testified already. I think we're all learning and growing in this moment, and that's what we're here for. The next set of persons are the following four: Sharif Dean, Lynn Maud Paul, Jessica Barreto, and Mary J. Gliza. Sharif Dean, Lynn Maud, Jessica Barreto, and Mary Jade, Gliza. And so we will begin with Sharif Dean.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sharif Dean, and I'm a college student of BMCC, Borough of Manhattan Community College. And also, I'm a member of El Puente Williamsburg Leadership. And also, what I'm going to say is that right now, on my own topic, that it's an area that they call a gentrification, which I have learned since my junior year of high school. And I feel like the gentrification is still an issue, and it's still an issue because many Black and brown community has now moving out of the area in certain areas. Because right now we have newcomers, most white newcomers moving in on Black and brown community. And also the part of the issue of gentrification in Black and brown community is that I'm experiencing targeting by white residents. And also I feel like it's a thing because they found like they have not seen it's a biggest issue. And also I see people of color, young people, they have witnessed it, and some of my people that I know, they experience it too, which is like very traumatizing to people. And also most white residents feel like they are so entitled of their actions of moving into the Black and brown neighborhood, but they are mostly feel like they just want to keep aware of their privilege. And also, they want to be open-minded, but not taking over the neighborhood. But we had to definitely had to educate most people of color about how serious gentrification really is while they move in Black and brown community. And also, we definitely want to keep this definitely a issue, and there had to be some consequences of these actions of new residents, white residents moving in the Black and brown community.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharif Dean. Lynn Maud, Paul.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Limad Paul. I'm 19, and I am a youth researcher with Integrational Change Initiative, a participatory action research group based out of the CUNY School of Professional Studies. And I wanted to talk about, I'm sorry. Yeah. I wanted to talk about racial injustices in the media. And so it's everywhere, from having no Black characters on TV to news outlets leaving out details or refusing to tell certain stories, from the way we're portrayed or used as the butt of the joke. Our cultures and practices are stolen from us without credit. We are constantly harassed by gruesome images and videos of the injustices done to us. We have become so jaded to it that we accept it as is or ignore it. The way we are described affect this tremendously. Those stereotypes and wrong information portrayed in the media shapes and influences people's perception of us. It's a never-ending cycle that will continue unless we have change. We should be included at the table to make sure the information presented is truthful and culturally correct. A diverse group of POCs need to be included in decision-making for the media. This is an example for how communities, especially marginalized communities, should be included when decisions are made about everything from media to policing, from education to climate change. For example, a council that included BIPOC would be able to provide accurate information, making things in the media socially, politically, and culturally correct. All councils need to include youth and BIPOC individuals, not just through public testimonies, but have power shared with us so that we are part of making decisions that impact us. Thank you for your time.
Hi, thank you. Thank you very much. The next person who we'll hear from is, just give me a second, I just gotta get back to the screen. It's just a little, forgive me all. All right, I think I'm in business now. I'm sorry, Jessica Barreto.
Hi, my name is Jessica Barreto. I'm a junior at Baruch College. I'm also representing the Intergenerational Change Initiative, who practices youth participatory action research. Racial justice, systemic justice. When we say Black Lives Matter, when people question why we go so hard on Black Lives Matter, it's because Black Lives Matters. The system do not care about us, not the healthcare system, who believes anyone who makes over $17,000 annually does not qualify for health insurance. A healthcare system that will have people of color in places where the wait is 2 hours just to be seen. A healthcare system that diagnoses people with COVID based on symptoms and does not do the decency to provide proper care, and wonder why people are skeptical of the vaccine. A system that undervalues minorities, the healthcare system. Black Lives Matter, the education system. Black lives go to school that don't have enough supplies, that don't grant the same opportunities as the school in the next zone because there is no funding. Where's the equality amongst our school system? A divide between the haves and the have-nots. An education system that teaches Black lives that we were slaves and worthless, but praises Christopher Columbus, who didn't discover America and raped many women. Where is the diversity? Where is the representation? Black people built the railroads, the White House, the education system. Black Lives Matter, the housing system that was built off redlining. Redlining equals the haves and the have-nots. The system created NYCHA, a place where people live amongst roaches and mice, and a neighborhood that gets minimum funding, not enough street cleanup, where there are no farmers market, but there is fast food to increase obesity, liquor stores to tempt the alcoholics, drug dealers trying to get by on every corner. That's how this housing system sets minorities up. Make housing affordable so that all New York City Black people can thrive. Black Lives Matter. The police system, who see Black people as threats because our skin tones are weapons. Defund the police and invest in the Black community. Black Lives Matters. Black lives can't breathe. Black people are being choked, suffocated, and literally killed daily by these systems. I met someone who said, all people are equal. No, we are not. When they say, when I see you, I don't see color. If you do not see me, if you do not see my color, you do not see me. Black Lives Matter. The intergenerational change initiatives ask the commissioners, invest in the people of color education, invest in the people of color health, invest in the people of color housing, defund the police, invest in the intergenerational opportunities for young people of color to have a seat alongside city government agencies, to help in the process of creating policies for young people of color by young people of color. Endorse the New York City Youth Agenda. Black Lives Matter.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We are going to hear from our fourth person on this panel, this group to provide testimony. And as we do, as she prepares, Mary J. Gliza Damian, I just want to make note of the fact that we are also joined. We're joined by another commissioner, Commissioner Phil Thompson, who also serves as the Deputy Mayor for Strategic Initiatives in this mayoral administration. So just wanted, he's probably been here for some time, but I didn't realize that he was with us, and I want to acknowledge his presence. Mary Jade, please begin.
Yes. Hello, my name is Mary Jade Gliza Damian, and I'm a high school senior from Queens. I'm here as a representative of the Legal Outreach, Civic Engagement, and Social Justice Council. Across the country, racial minorities are less likely to be registered to vote compared to their white counterparts. However, I feel that there is more that we can be doing to change this. Since 2019, New York has allowed for 16 and 17-year-olds to pre-register to vote. Pre-registration is important because soon-to-be voters are automatically sent information about the process and timing of voting upon becoming eligible. Yet, there's still many students who are not aware of pre-registration or do not know how to go about it. Over the past year, our council has hosted workshops and used social media to spread the word to our communities. But we would like to see more being done. While NYC has launched a student voter registration drive as a part of Civics Week, this initiative has not yet reached all of the 520 public high schools. Other states with similar pre-registration laws have made pre-registration forms available in all schools, mailed these forms to those eligible to pre-register using school rosters, included the forms with school handouts, and as a fun little tidbit, sent I-registered stickers and / other paraphernalia to encourage others to pre-register and vote. Implementing these small but intentional strategies in all NYC high schools to encourage students to pre-register as early as possible can be key in increasing the comparatively low registration and turnout rates among racial minorities. Additionally, the majority of classes provided for civic engagement are not introduced early enough within the high school curriculum. There should also be a call to action to implement a more widespread and accessible solution for NYC high schools to educate students not only to vote, but also help them navigate researching candidates and voter turnout for more than just the presidential election. This will truly align with increasing not just registration and turnout rates, but increasing civic engagement by finding candidates to address problems within our community, and therefore equipping us new voters with the democratic heart this country prides itself over. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I want to thank you all. And now I just want to make sure that if there are commissioners who would like to ask questions or comments, that we hear from them. Let's see. I'm just going to tell you panelists that you're speaking with such clarity and at times specificity that you're taking us right where we need to go. And so that in part is the reason why we sometimes don't have follow-up questions. But you're definitely being heard and appreciated. It doesn't appear that we have any questions or comments. I want to thank you all for your testimony. And we will now move to the third group. And the persons who are to speak are the following: Marcus Nelson, Cassandra Syriac, and Jen Tang, who will be reading the testimony of Shawnee Adolphe. So we will begin with Marcus Nelson. Good evening.
Good evening. Is my audio okay? Just
yes,
making
yes,
sure so I
hear
don't
you very well.
go halfway through. All right. Hello, my name is Marcus Nelson. I'm a high school junior from Queens. Like Mary Jade, I'm a representative of the Legal Outreach, Civic Engagement, Social Justice Council. In the past year, the council turned its attention towards the policing of students of color on the subway, specifically in the case of turnstile hopping. According to police data, Black and Hispanic people represent over 70% of those fined and about 90% of those arrested for turnstile hopping. However, these students had no other choice. While student Metro cards are supposed to provide students free transportation to and from school and, as the MTA claims, other school-related activities, there are far too many examples of students evading fares because a 3-swipe limit simply isn't enough. A perfect example is a group of high school students shown walking through the emergency exit door in Inside Edition's video entitled "How New York Commuters Evade Paying Subway Fares." Watch the video on your own time if you want to see this example yourself. While the reporter was critical of students for refusing to pay, she failed to report that they were simply trying to get to gym class and their student Metro cards wouldn't cover the commute. For many students, school and other school-related activities require more than 3 Metro card swipes. And that is an expense students can't continuously take. In fact, according to the Department of Education, nearly 73% of New York City students are economically disadvantaged, the vast majority of which are students of color. As a result, a large group of students are being involuntarily excluded from extracurricular programming due to transportation costs. As students, we participate in a variety of after-school and weekend activities, many of which serve to enhance our education or contribute in other ways, such as social and emotional development, physical health, and providing a safe environment. Research has shown that after-school programs increase youth earning potential, improve school performance, and reduce crime in all of our areas. While so many incredible after-school opportunities exist around New York City, such as legal outreach, students who cannot afford transportation are kept from participating. And through a petition our council launched last year, we know that students in our community agree. We believe that student MetroCard fares are an important issue that should be covered or at least considered in the commission report. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The next person is Cassandra Syriac. Please begin.
Hello.
Hi, we can hear you.
Hello, my name is Cassandra Syriac, and I'm a high school senior from Brooklyn. I'm also here today as a representative of the Legal Outreach, Civic Engagement, and Social Justice Council. As you've previously heard from MJ and Marcus, we're all part of the council, and we have initiatives that we'd like to talk about today. Last year, the council was formed by our desire to enact change following the murder of George Floyd. We are a student-led program, and each year we choose a few issues that we find to be some of the most pressing in our communities, and we launch campaigns to address these concerns. I would like to speak briefly on our newest project this year, which is introducing a police use of force lesson plan to our middle schools and high schools. Over the past decade, policing has become a national conversation, yet we as students are not properly equipped with the tools or vocabulary to understand and contribute the discussion around the use of force. We need an avenue to learn about the criminal justice system and the role of effective law enforcement, while also being taught about proper police procedure and our rights under the law. Legal outreach teaches a police use of force lesson to all 8th graders coming into the program. Through this lesson, I learned about Miranda rights, the instances when an officer would deploy reasonable force, and the purpose of the Civilian Complaint Review Board, and so much more. Understanding police use of force is so important because as it continues to be a pressing conversation across the country, I feel that every New York City school should incorporate this lesson for their students.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The next person we will hear from is Jen Tang. Jen Tang. Just check what's happening in the participant list with Jen. If you all would just hold tight as we try to find out what's going on with Jen. I'm going to ask Damala Denny to present now. Damala Denny. Are you all able to hear me? Make sure.
I'm able to hear you, and I'm
All
able
right.
to.
Okay, Jennifer Tang, please begin.
Thank you. And this is a testimony I'm reading for Shani Adelphi. My name is Shani Adelphi. I know that by where I work, the amount of policing causes the youth to not want to be outside or stay around the neighborhood. I recently was able to speak to some of the local community members by where I work, and the youth and the adults had very similar but different points of view. Certain stores treat Black and brown youth differently from their older white counterparts, despite the neighborhood being predominantly Black and brown. Situations like these discourage youth from wanting to be active members in their community. I speak to so many young people who feel as if they have to move in order to be able to live a life where they're treated fairly. I'm a youth researcher with the Intergenerational Change Initiative, a participatory action research group based out of the CUNY School of Professional Studies, and our research supports this view. When being asked about their perceptions of police, young people generally believe that police discriminate against various groups. 54% of young people believe police discriminate based on race, 51% based on class, 50% of youth feel that police discriminate based on immigration status, 41% based on gender, and 39% of young people feel that the police discriminate based on LGBTQ identities. And when perceptions were examined by race, white youth generally thought better about police than young people of other races. White youth were also less likely to believe that police discriminate. When young people were asked about mental health, one research participant said, "We need to make mental health care free to the public and therefore accessible to all. We also need Black, queer, and trans-centered mental health care, and we need to not make mental health care centers hyper-policed. We also would benefit from making sure the mental health care professionals don't gaslight Black, queer, and trans patients when speaking about the harm and trauma that institutionalized racism, homophobia, and transphobia bring to us. These are just a couple of starters." This quote demonstrates how racial injustice impacts young people in a variety of ways that are intersecting and layered. This demonstrates why we need to include youth perspectives not only on specific issues, but throughout how the city makes decisions. Amending the city charter is an opportunity to make bold steps towards rectifying systemic injustices and make the city more responsive to its citizens, including young people. Some ideas include adding a youth representative to decision-making bodies, requiring that the city use youth data in making decisions that affect us, and if the city is proposing a chief diversity officer, that person include young people when making decisions. We call on the city to work in ways that are more just and democratic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jennifer And now we will turn to Damala. Would you like to speak, Damala Denny? Just want to make sure that I believe that Damala will be submitting written testimony. So thank you all. Thank you very much. Are there any commissioners who would like to comment or ask questions of those who've presented? All right. Well, I want to thank all who have presented today for your testimony and just for the critical points that you've made that help to point us and steer us in the direction in which we need to move and act. We very much appreciate all that you've shared, and we'll do our best to make sure that that your thoughts, your interests, your concerns, which reflect significant citywide and communal interests, are heard and respected and incorporated into our work. I want to take a quick minute to ask if there's anybody else who hasn't had an opportunity to share some of their thoughts, but would like to do so. I'm just going to take a few seconds right now to pause. If there is such a person, then unmute yourself, raise your hand, and we will, if you're not able to unmute yourself, we will unmute you, and we'll take a few minutes to hear from you. So I'm just going to pause for a second and ensure that there isn't someone who hasn't been heard who would like to be heard. Okay. Again, I want to thank you all, and I want to thank the commission members who have participated as well, and then those who have just listened in, and of course, DYCD for joining us. I'm going to hand things over right now to Commissioner Joanne Yu to close us out.
Thank you all for joining us this evening. Your testimony is incredibly important to this process. I just want to say personally how impressed and moved I am by your incredible testimony and your leadership and organizing and telling us things that that we need to listen to as we consider how to move forward. Your testimony is on public record, and we have taken notes, and this will help shape our recommendations. If you did not get to, we did not get to you, and if you change your mind and you'd like to submit written testimony, you can do so by visiting our website. The website is nyc.gov/racialjustice. Lastly, please follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and go to our website to stay abreast of upcoming meetings and events. Follow us on social media at Racial Justice NYC on Instagram and Facebook, and at Racial Justice NY on Twitter. With that, thank you everybody and good night. Have a great weekend.
Good night.